For 7 years, I scraped by, giving up everything to buy my dream apartment. Then, my family turned on me, demanding I hand it over to cover my brother's supposed million-dollar casino debts. They even sued me to take what I'd built. But then, I uncovered secrets they'd been hiding, and it turned my life upside down. My name's Jacob Wilson, and I'm 30 years old. A month ago, I bought my first apartment in a Seattle suburb, Washington. It was my dream, the thing I'd been grinding for 7 years to get. Skipping vacations, wearing thrift store clothes, passing on coffee if it cost more than $2. I worked, saved, and pictured the day I'd have my own place. And I did it. A 2-bedroom, 900-square-foot spot with a view of the lake, a cozy backyard, and a wooden fence I wanted to paint white. It cost $450,000. I put down $90,000 from my savings, scraped together over years, and took out a 4% mortgage. Signing those papers, my throat tightened with emotion. I stood in the empty living room, staring at the lake through the window, and it hit me. This is mine. I made it. My name's Jacob Wilson, and I'm 30 years old. A month ago, I bought my first apartment in a Seattle suburb, Washington. It was my dream, the thing I'd been grinding for 7 years to get. Skipping vacations, wearing thrift store clothes, passing on coffee if it cost more than $2. I worked, saved, and pictured the day I'd have my own place. And I did it. A 2-bedroom, 900-square-foot spot with a view of the lake, a cozy backyard, and a wooden fence I wanted to paint white. It cost $450,000. I put down $90,000 from my savings, scraped together over years, and took out a 4% mortgage. Signing those papers, my throat tightened with emotion. I stood in the empty living room, staring at the lake through the window, and it hit me. This is mine. I made it. I merely dropped my phone. Ethan, casinos? $400,000? It sounded like a bad prank. I laughed, but Mom cut me off. This isn't funny. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Now it's your turn to help the family. I pushed back, saying I'd saved for 7 years, that this was my money, my life. Dad called me selfish, said I was abandoning my brother. Mom piled on, claiming they'd always supported me, and now I owed them. Supported me? I flashed back to living in a basement with 2 roommates, eating instant noodles, while they paid for Ethan's downtown Seattle apartment, rented him a studio with a bay view, and bought him a brand new Jeep for his 21st birthday. The call ended in yelling. I hung up when Dad started shouting about my moral duty. I nearly dropped my phone. Ethan? Casinos? $400,000? It sounded like a bad prank. I laughed, but Mom cut me off. This isn't funny. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Now it's your turn to help the family. I pushed back, saying I'd saved for 7 years, that this was my money, my life. Dad called me selfish, said I was abandoning my brother. Mom piled on, claiming they'd always supported me, and now I owed them. Supported me? I flashed back to living in a basement with 2 roommates, eating instant noodles, while they paid for Ethan's downtown Seattle apartment, rented him a studio with a bay view, and bought him a brand new Jeep for his 21st birthday. The call ended in yelling. I hung up when Dad started shouting about my moral duty. I didn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, trying to wrap my head around how my parents, who'd taught me about honesty and hard work, could suggest this. My thoughts were a mess. I remembered being a kid. At 10, I noticed Ethan got new sneakers, toys, and soccer camp, while I got hand-me-downs and lectures about responsibility. At 15, I started working, washing dishes at a local diner to buy a laptop for school because my parents said no. They were footing the bill for Ethan's summer camp. I didn't complain. I got used to it. But this was too much. The next morning, I called Ethan, asking about the debts, what was going on. He was cagey, saying it was complicated, that he'd screwed up, but Mom and Dad would handle it. I pressed him, asking if he really. A week later, a courier handed me a court summons. My parents had sued me, demanding I sell my apartment to cover Ethan's debts. Their arguments read like a cheesy soap opera script. They claimed I owed them for raising me, tallying up $350,000 in childhood expenses, diapers, school lunches, even a $15 pizza receipt from 2005 they must have kept like a trophy. They said Ethan was battling a gambling addiction, and since I was financially stable, I could just buy another place. The most ridiculous part? They wanted me to keep paying the mortgage for 2 years while Ethan got back on his feet. So I'd work my ass off while they wrecked my life? I was furious. Staring at the summons, my hands shook. My parents, who I thought had my back, were suing me. I called a buddy who was studying law. He said the lawsuit was absurd, no chance it'd hold up, but warned it'd get messy. He wasn't kidding. I started digging into the past to figure out how things got this bad. I always knew Ethan was the golden child. I'm the older one, used to being the responsible kid. At 17, I started working, stocking shelves at a supermarket, then delivering pizzas. I saved every penny, knowing no one was handing me anything. By 19, I was on my own. I bought a beat-up Ford Focus for $1,200, older than me, with 180,000 miles, but I was proud of it. I enrolled in a local college, studied logistics, worked nights, and slept 4 hours a day. I graduated with honors, took supply chain management courses, and landed a job at a transport company. Now, I'm a manager, pulling in $85,000 a year. Not bad for a guy who started scrubbing dishes. Ethan was different. My parents paid for everything: private English lessons, summer camps, trips to California with his buddies. When he turned 18, they rented him a downtown Seattle apartment so he'd feel comfortable at college. He flunked out, switching majors 3 times, marketing, graphic design, you name it, before dropping out. But they kept spoiling him. They bought him a Jeep for his 21st birthday, covered his rent, and gave him cash for projects. When I asked for $200 for textbooks, Mom said, "We're focused on Ethan right now." I didn't hold a grudge. I was used to it. But staring at that summons, I realized this wasn't just unfair. It was betrayal. I decided to fight the lawsuit myself. A lawyer would have cost $15,000 to $20,000, and I was confident I could handle it. I'm good with paperwork, and their case looked so flimsy any judge would see through it. I started gathering evidence, bank statements from 7 years showing every cent I saved, mortgage papers with only my name, college receipts I paid myself, emails where I asked my parents for textbook money, and they refused, saying they were focused on Ethan. I found an old email where Mom said she couldn't spare $200 for my textbook because Ethan needed a new camera for a photo project. That one burned. It was a reminder I was always second fiddle. While digging through records, I learned my Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, was bankrolling the lawsuit. Linda never liked me. When I was 19, I didn't invite her to my college graduation. I didn't even have a ceremony. Just grabbed my diploma and went to work. But she took it personally, like I'd snubbed her in public. Since then, she called me a snob who thinks he's better than the family, because I work in an office with a view of the bay. She even said at a family barbecue once, "Jacob thinks he's above us 'cause he doesn't drink beer on weekends. Now she was footing the bill for my parents' lawyer and was all in on this fight. My cousin Sarah, who's always been straight with me, said Linda was calling relatives, spreading lies about how ungrateful I was. She even called my grandma to talk some sense into me. Grandma shut her down. Linda, get a life. My parents tried rallying the family too. They called my 82-year-old grandpa, who told Dad he was nuts if he thought I should give. Their lawyer, a shady guy Linda found, looked like he stepped out of a slip-and-fall call now ad. He offered a settlement. I'd give the apartment to Ethan, pay the mortgage for 24 months, fork over $50,000 for emotional damage to the family, and write an apology for splitting the family. I laughed into the phone and told him Linda was wasting her money. But inside, I was boiling. How dare they? Mom posted in our family group chat that I'd forgotten who raised me and was refusing to help my brother fighting addiction. Linda chimed in, calling me a family disgrace. Ethan posted a picture of a fancy penthouse on Instagram, obviously pulled from Pinterest, with a caption about moving into his new place soon, thanks to Mom and Dad. I messaged him, but he just said, "Bro, chill, it'll be fine." They uninvited me from Thanksgiving. Mom sent a group text saying my actions threatened Ethan's future, so I wasn't welcome at family gatherings. I decided I'd order to court day felt like a scene from a thriller. I showed up an hour early, suited up, clutching a folder of documents, my heart pounding. My parents, Ethan and Linda, rolled in wearing matching red Family First t-shirts. Ethan rushed up to me in the hallway, loudly saying, "I forgive you for making us do this." I stepped back and he nearly tripped. Linda hissed, "Ungrateful." I walked past, trying not to lose it. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, called for order. Their lawyer argued my parents poured their lives and money into raising me, and Ethan needed help with his debts. I said I bought the apartment with my savings and was the sole borrower. The judge raised an eyebrow and jotted something down. Their evidence was a joke. Childhood photos of me and Ethan at Disneyland, a sketchy $400,000 debt statement for Ethan, a spreadsheet of costs for raising me, including that 2005 pizza receipt, screenshots of my LinkedIn showing I'm a manager, and Ethan's plan to turn my apartment into a gambling rehab center. 3 pages of nonsense that read like a middle school essay. I presented my evidence: 7 years of bank statements, mortgage pay, college receipts, emails where my parents refused to help me because they were focused on Ethan. I showed the email about the $200 textbook and Ethan's camera. The judge asked Ethan what he did for work. He mumbled about a project. Mom interrupted, calling him an entrepreneur. Dad said, "Income doesn't define worth." Linda shouted that Ethan deserved the apartment. The judge warned she'd kick her out. Ethan admitted he makes motivational TikTok videos but has no income. The judge asked my parents if they really expected me, after saving for 7 years, to give my apartment to a jobless brother with no plan while still paying the mortgage. Their lawyer tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. "I've heard enough. Decision in a week." I left the courtroom, feeling like I'd won a round. My parents didn't look at me. Ethan muttered I'd regret it. Linda glared. I got in my car and let out a deep breath. 5 days later, a letter came. The lawsuit was dismissed. No legal basis. I read it 3 times to believe it. But the drama didn't stop there. Outside the courthouse, Linda screamed that I was dead to the family. Ethan dropped to his knees, sobbing, saying I stole his future. Mom said I wasn't her son anymore. Dad accused me of tearing the family apart. Back home, I checked the security cameras I'd installed after the summons. The footage showed Ethan sneaking toward my car with a spray paint can, but bolting when neighbors appeared. Linda walked up my path with scissors, backing off when the motion light flicked on. I filed a police report with the videos. The officer said it was serious and they'd look into it. That night, Ethan called, freaking out, yelling, "I didn't gamble in casinos. It's all fake." He rambled that our parents found his debts through some creditor he didn't know. I recorded the call. His words flipped everything. Was he not the bad guy? Were they using him? I hired a private investigator for $5,000. A month later, he dropped a bombshell. Ethan's debts were bogus. My parents had teamed up with a creditor, a buddy of Linda's from her poker club. They faked the documents to seize my apartment. Why? My parents had sunk $200,000 into Linda's failed business, a chain of wellness centers that went bust. They were drowning in debt, and my apartment was their lifeline. The investigator found letters Mom wrote to Linda 15 years ago. In one, she complained, "Jacob's too independent. He's not like Ethan, hard to handle." In another, "If Jacob keeps being stubborn, we'll lose control." It hit me like a punch. They always saw me as a threat, not a son. I handed the evidence to the police. They opened a fraud case, but it's moving slowly. I filed a civil lawsuit against my parents and Linda for fraud and defamation. My lawyer said with the investigators' evidence, we had a solid case. I met Ethan at a cafe, hoping he'd testify. He looked rough, said, "I didn't know about their plan, but I can't go against them." Guilt was in his eyes, but he chose silence. Later, Sarah told me Ethan was secretly meeting Linda. It seemed like he was playing both sides, out of fear or for gain. Sarah found a box of papers at Grandma's, including Mom's diary. A 2003 entry read, "Michael wants Jacob to be an engineer, but I'm scared he'll leave the family. Ethan's our chance to keep things together." They'd planned since I was a kid to keep me in line so I wouldn't leave. Ethan was their tool. It hurt to realize. Linda broke a restraining order, sending me a threatening email through my work account, saying I'd regret it. I forwarded it to her boss, and she got fired from her insurance job. Ethan started working as a barista at Starbucks, but gripes to everyone that it's beneath him. My parents became pariahs at their church. Gossip spreads fast in Seattle. My uncle Richard, who always seemed neutral, backed my parents. He called and said, "You've gone too far. Family's sacred." Sarah found out Richard owes Linda $50,000 for his business. He's on her side to avoid paying up. The police found another creditor tied to Linda, and now she's being questioned about other cases. The investigator thinks Linda's linked to a local gang running small-time scams. Ethan's debts were part of their scheme. It scared me. I started double-checking my locks Ethan stopped talking to me. Sarah saw him meeting our parents, handing them papers. I suspect he knew more about the fake debts than he let on. One day, I found an unsigned note in my mailbox. "Give up the apartment and it's over." The handwriting looked like Ethan's. I gave it to the police. My brother, who I'd defended, turned out to be a traitor. The family split. Sarah, Uncle Mark, Grandma, and Grandpa are with me. A quarter of the relatives are neutral. The rest, including Richard and Linda, think I should have helped. Mom sent texts begging for forgiveness, saying they did it for Ethan. Dad wrote that family should stick together. I didn't reply. Life started looking up. I got a promotion. Senior manager, $100,000 salary. I upgraded my home security. Cameras, sensors, the works. I adopted a cat, Milo, a ginger troublemaker from the shelter who sleeps on the windowsill and steals food. We threw parties with friends. My place finally felt like home. Grandpa came by on Saturdays, teaching me to make chili and sharing stories from his youth. He said, "I'm proud of you, Jacob." That meant more than any win. My lawsuit against my parents and Linda was picking up steam. The police were close to arresting Linda for fraud, but her connections slowed things down. The investigator warned that her poker club friends weren't just card players. They were part of a money laundering network using fake debts. That explained why Ethan's debts looked fishy. The statements came from a shell company in Nevada, tied to an empty office. I started thinking Linda wasn't just a spiteful aunt, but someone deep in shady stuff. It freaked me out. I added more locks and cameras, kept looking over my shoulder when I left the house. Seattle's not that big, and the idea that someone from her circle might be watching me kept me on edge. One night, I woke up to the sound of shattering glass. My heart raced. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed and crept to the window. A brick, wrapped in a note, lay on the path. "You don't know who you're messing with." It wasn't Ethan's handwriting, but I thought of Linda. The cameras caught a hooded figure sprinting through a neighbor's yard. The police took the brick and note, but found no prints. The officer told me to be careful and avoid going out at night. I started sleeping with the light on, and Milo, sensing my stress, purred louder, curling up next to me. I decided to dig deeper. The investigator gave me new evidence: a bank transfer from Linda to my parents a month before the lawsuit, labeled consulting fees. It proved they'd planned the scam in advance. Then came another twist. Sarah, rummaging through Grandma's old stuff, found letters Mom wrote, not just to Linda, but to a college friend. In one from 1998, she admitted she was scared of my personality. "Jacob's growing up too stubborn. He doesn't listen like Ethan. Sometimes I wish he was the younger one. It'd be easier." It cut deep. I knew Ethan was their favorite, but reading that Mom regretted who I was felt like a knife to the chest. I gave the letters to my lawyer. He said they wouldn't hold up in court, but would strengthen my case by showing how my parents manipulated us from the start. He suggested meeting Ethan again, hoping he'd change his mind and testify. I agreed, though I wasn't optimistic. We met at a diner on the edge of Seattle. Ethan looked worse than before. Dark circles under his eyes, messy hair, wrinkled clothes. He fidgeted with a napkin, avoiding eye contact. I asked why he was meeting Linda. He froze, then muttered that she promised him a fresh start if he helped convince me to give up the apartment. "I didn't want to, Jacob," he said, "but they said it was the only way." My stomach churned. My brother, who I'd stuck up for, was in on their plan. I recorded that conversation and passed it to the investigator. It was a game changer. Ethan knew about the fake debts, but stayed quiet because Linda promised him a cut from selling my apartment. The investigator found out Linda wasn't just trying to bail out my parents. She wanted the money for a new business, a sketchy cryptocurrency scheme she was pitching to her poker buddies. That explained her obsession with my apartment. It wasn't just about saving my parents. It was her ticket to another con. The police searched Linda's house. They found documents tying her to 3 other fake debt cases, and evidence linking her to a local gang involved in extortion. Linda was arrested, but got out on bail, which only made me more paranoid. I started getting anonymous calls, silence on the line, just heavy breathing. Once, I heard a whisper, "You'll pay." I wasn't sure if it was Linda or one of her cronies, but the police stepped up patrols in my neighborhood. Meanwhile, my lawsuit against my parents and Linda was moving forward. My lawyer was confident we'd win, especially with the new evidence. But my parents didn't back down. They hired a new lawyer, a pricey one with a shark-like reputation. I was shocked. Where'd they get the cash? The investigator found out they'd sold their family home in a Seattle suburb, where they'd lived for 20 years. They moved into a cheap rental apartment, using the sale money for legal fees. It was another gut punch. They'd given up their home to keep fighting me. I couldn't understand why they were so fixated on Ethan. What made him so special? Sarah brought another find, an old audio cassette from Grandma's stuff. It was a 2000 conversation between Mom and her friend. I played it, and Mom's young, sharp voice filled the room. She talked about fearing she'd lose control of the family, how even at 5, I was too independent. She said Ethan's our chance to fix things. He'll be what we want. I stopped the tape, unable to listen more. It confirmed everything. They saw me as a threat, and Ethan as a puppet they could mold. I showed the tape to my lawyer. He said it wasn't court evidence, but helped explain their motives. I started thinking their obsession with Ethan wasn't just love. It was a way to make up for their own failures. Dad, a former engineer, lost his job in the 90s and never bounced back, scraping by with odd jobs. Mom, who wanted to be an artist, gave it up for the family. Ethan became their project, their second chance, while I was the obstacle because I wouldn't fall in line. Ethan vanished after our diner meeting. He stopped answering calls. Sarah spotted him downtown Seattle, at a fancy cafe with a guy in a suit. She said Ethan looked scared but didn't approach, not wanting to spook him. I suspected he'd gotten mixed up with Linda's people. The investigator confirmed it. Ethan was seen with one of her associates, a guy named Ray, known in Seattle's criminal circles. That scared me most. My brother, who I still hope to save, was deeper in this mess than I'd thought. One day, I got home and noticed the garage door was slightly open. I was sure I'd locked it. Nothing was missing inside, but I found a photo on the floor, an old one from a family picnic 15 years ago. On the back, it said, "You can't run from family." It was Ethan's handwriting. I gave it to the police, but there were no prints. Fear and anger battled inside me. Why was he doing this? What did they promise him? My Uncle Richard, who'd backed my parents, called out of the blue, asking to meet. I agreed, hoping to learn what he knew. We met at a park by the lake. He looked older, with deep wrinkles I hadn't noticed before. He said he wanted to fix the family, but I could tell he was nervous. I asked point-blank why he was on Linda's side. He hesitated, then admitted he owed her not $50,000, as Sarah thought, but $100,000. Linda had loaned him money for his failed restaurant, which shut down in a year. Now she was threatening to sue him if he didn't help her against me. I recorded the conversation and gave it to the investigator. Richard was another link in the chain of betrayals. My lawsuit against my parents and Linda reached its first hearing. Their new lawyer was slick, painting me as a greedy careerist who turned his back on family for luxury. But my evidence, bank transfers, fake debt papers, Linda's emails, Ethan's recorded talk, was ironclad. The judge, the same one who tossed their first lawsuit, looked annoyed at their new try. She gave us 3 months to prepare, but I felt we were close to winning. Life, despite the chaos, started to settle. I got a promotion, senior manager, $100,000 salary. I beefed up my home security, new locks, cameras, motion sensors. I adopted Milo, a ginger cat from the shelter who's a total rascal, sleeping on the windowsill and swiping food off my plate. Friends came over for parties, filling the house with laughter and warmth. Grandpa visited on Saturdays, teaching me his chili recipe and telling stories from his youth. He said, "I'm proud of you, Jacob. That beat any victory." Photography classes, a dream I'd put off for years. My apartment became my fortress, a place where I felt safe. But the past wouldn't let go. Linda, out on bail, got sneakier but didn't quit. She posted in a local Facebook group that I ruined the family for money. The post was deleted, but not before hundreds saw it. My parents stopped writing, but I knew they weren't done. Ethan was a mystery, victim or accomplice. I wanted to believe he was just lost, but the note and his meetings with Linda said otherwise. One night, I found a letter, not an email, but a paper envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a copy of an old family photo, me and Ethan as kids building a sandcastle. On the back it said, "You can still fix this." I didn't sleep, gripping my bat. This wasn't over. The months after the first hearing were like running through a minefield. The police arrested Linda again, this time for trying to bribe a witness. She'd offered money to a former coworker from her insurance job to lie, saying I'd taken out loans in my parents' names. The coworker refused and went to the police. It was a turning point. Linda was now under investigation, not just for fraud, but for obstructing justice. Her ties to a gang the investigator linked to money laundering started coming to light. The police found proof she used fake debts not just against Ethan, but to extort other families. My apartment was just one target. I felt like a hunted animal. Anonymous calls kept coming, now with threats, "You can't hide." I hired a security firm for 24/7 surveillance on my house. Milo, my cat, was my only comfort, curling up on my lap while I read the investigator's reports. He found another clue, Linda's emails with an investor promising millions for a crypto project. My apartment was meant to be the seed money. It explained her fixation. She didn't just want to help my parents. She saw me as a roadblock to her next scam. Ethan showed up out of nowhere 3 months after our diner talk. He came to my house late at night, unannounced. I opened the door, phone in hand with 911 dialed. He looked like a ghost, pale, shaky hands, wrinkled jacket. He said, "Jacob, I need your help." I was stunned. After everything, his silence, meetings with Linda, the note, he was asking for help? I let him in, but stayed on guard. He said Linda and her buddy Ray were blackmailing. I recorded his story and gave it to the investigator. Ethan agreed to testify against Linda, but only if the police protected him. It was risky, but I saw a chance to blow the whole scheme wide open. The police put Ethan in witness protection, and he vanished from Seattle. Sarah later said she heard he was spotted in Tacoma, but he didn't contact the family. I felt relief mixed with pain. My brother might still be a victim, but his weakness made him complicit. When my parents heard about Linda's arrest, they tried reaching out. Mom sent a long, teary letter about family, saying they messed up but did it for Ethan. Dad called, begging to meet, but I said no. I couldn't forgive them, not just for the lawsuit, but for years of putting Ethan first. The investigator found another damning piece, a contract my parents signed with Linda, agreeing to give her half the money from selling my apartment for services to save Ethan. It was the final nail in their excuses. My Uncle Richard was in deeper than I thought. The investigator found he didn't just owe Linda money, he was helping her find investors for her crypto scam. When I confronted him at a family gathering at Grandma's, he tried to brush it off, but I saw his fear. He knew the police were closing in. Later, he skipped town, leaving his wife a note saying he was on business. Sarah heard he was in Portland, but no one knew for sure. My lawsuit against my parents and Linda hit its final hearing. The judge heard everything: fake debt papers, bank transfers, Linda's emails, Ethan's testimony. She ruled in my favor. My parents and Linda owed me $200,000 for emotional distress and legal fees. Linda also got 3 years in prison for fraud and bribery. My parents sold their car and a second apartment to cover the debt. But I knew they'd never pay it all. For me, it wasn't just a win, it was closure. But it wasn't over. A month after the trial, I got a package with no return address. Inside was an old family Bible, one Mom kept like a heirloom. On the first page it said, "Family is all we have. Forgive us." I didn't know who sent it, Mom, Dad, or someone else. I put the Bible in a box and stashed it in the closet. Forgiveness wasn't in me, but it wasn't over. A month after the trial, I got a package with no return address. Inside was an old family Bible, one Mom kept like an heirloom. On the first page, it said, "Family is all we have. Forgive us." I didn't know who sent it, Mom, Dad, or someone else. I put the Bible in a box and stashed it in the closet. Forgiveness wasn't in me. I moved to a new apartment, not because I gave up, but because I wanted a fresh start. The new place was smaller but cozier, with a park view. Milo settled in fast, claiming the best windowsill spot. I kept working, got another promotion. Now I run the logistics department. Grandpa started coming by more, bringing his old fishing rods and telling stories about catching fish in the 60s. Sarah became my closest ally, helping with paperwork and even starting law school. Inspired by my fight, friends filled my home with warmth, and photography classes became my escape. I'd shoot sunsets over the lake, finding peace in them. But the past lingered. I heard Ethan left witness protection and was back in Seattle. He texted me, "I want to make things right." I didn't respond, not because I didn't believe him, but because I didn't know who he was anymore. Linda, in prison, kept sending me letters, claiming I ruined her life. I didn't read them, just sent them to the police. My parents lived in a tiny apartment on the outskirts, avoiding family. The family I knew was gone. I learned family isn't about blood, it's about respect. Grandpa, Sarah, Uncle Mark, they were there for me. Milo purred on the windowsill as I wrote this. My new apartment is my home, my world. I didn't just win the lawsuit, I won the right to live my life. The best revenge is living well, and I'm doing it. What's your deal with your siblings? Do your parents treat you all the same? Share your story. Let's support each other.